Hello everyone, my name is Paul Thurt, and if you're watching this video and you're thinking about investing in a Dolby Atmos setup, I'm not going to lie to you, spoiler alert, this video is most likely going to put you off the idea of investing in Dolby Atmos, because in this video I am going to tell you about all of the things that I didn't know, and I'm going to kind of detail a lot of the struggles that I had building this now finished Dolby Atmos room. Right, first thing you need to think about is your layout. In terms of a Dolby Atmos layout, it's obviously going to depend on, the speaker array that you're going for. The most common that most people are going for are a 7.1.4 setup. 7 around you, 1 sub, 4 on the ceilings. Now, the good thing is, right, to kind of put your mind at ease, is that there is an Excel kind of document that you can download, and it's called DART, right? And it's basically a spreadsheet that you can input the measurements of your room, and the spreadsheet will kind of give you an array that will work for your room. Now, in regards to the main kind of layouts, there's basically 2 main layouts. There's equidistant. This is normally kind of what Dolby classes like the optimal layout, because it's suitable mostly for large rooms, and from what I've read, it seemingly doesn't suffer from time alignment issues. And when I say time alignment issues, I mean time alignment issues between channels. Now, there's also I don't know how to say it, it's either orthogonal or orthogonal. I don't know how to say it. But however, this layout will favour a more set back sweet spot, as well as a control room with significant depth. And when I first input my kind of room measurements in, which by the way is just slightly smaller from like the standard spec, it's just slightly smaller, it still gave me an array, and I was like, yeah, okay, that I could make that work. However, when I actually thought about it, and when I was in the room and the speakers came, because I stupidly bought the fucking speakers first, I came to the very, very quick conclusion that both setups weren't going to work because of where my door was in the room, and it's something that I hadn't even thought about. Now, the rear speaker in my room was going to be basically that close to my door, because it had to be kind of very near the back end of the room, which obviously was going to cause me an issue, because obviously when you open the door, the speaker's going to be in the way. And I was like, right, it's going to be difficult for people getting out, because the door only opens one way. And then I was like, oh my God, like, how's that going to work for people getting in and out? And I was just like, this isn't going to work. It just isn't going to work. I could try and make it work if I take the door out and, I don't know, come out with a screen. And I was like, oh, but if I take the door out, then again, I'm going to be letting a lot of ambient noise come in. And it just wasn't going to work. But thankfully, and thank God, like, there was one last option. There is a circular ITU layout option. And what this layout allowed me to do was have the rear speakers more kind of away from the door, which meant that I could fully open the door and, it's not touching that rear speaker, and it's still enough to kind of let you go in and out. But thankfully, the rear speakers stayed the same, so they managed to stay at the very back end of the room, which was going to work with the original setup that I had. That was just genuinely like getting the layout of the room. That was just the first thing. And thinking about your room layout and your room setup and your room size and your dimensions are very, very, very important. And you should genuinely not do what I did and buy the speakers first. You should ensure that your room is going to work for a Dolby Atmos setup. However, side note, when I was speaking to speaker manufacturers, they were all saying the same thing, which was basically the speaker position doesn't have to be exact. Now, the reason that the speaker position isn't as important is because the speaker calibration will kind of cater for a lot of that. However, the one thing that you do need to get bang on, which they all told me, is the angles. On the DART software, not only does it give you the position of the speaker, it also gives you the angle that the speaker should be facing in relation to the sweet spot. So you can kind of have a little play about with the speaker position, and even if your room's slightly smaller, the room calibration can kind of take some of that into consideration, but your angles still have to be bang on. So you do need to make sure, again with your height speakers as well, that in the room that you've got, you can get those angles. Right, so you've got yourself in a position where you know that the room's going to work, the layout's going to work, and your room is suitable for Dolby Atmos. That's just one part of it. What you've now got to do is you've now got to check if your room is suitable to power all of these speakers. Think about if you've got a 7.1.4 setup like mine, there's 12 speakers and they're in different positions. You may have enough sockets, but they might not be in the right position. So, and the special thing about your height speakers, that's the thing that I kind of, again, as an afterthought, I got the speakers and I was like, Jesus, how am I? I'm looking at them now and I'm like, fuck, how am I going to power them? In most cases, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to think a lot about power leads, and you're going to have to think about length of power leads, because, you know, especially with height speakers, you're going to, if you don't have a socket, again, it might be, you need to kind of get them to a socket. You're going to have to calculate the right length of power cable needed. But even if you've got all of that sorted, you've then got to ensure that your board can take the amount of load that this room's going to take. Because again, you're going to have 12 speakers, you're going to have your interface, you might have other things going on, you might have lighting going on. It's a lot of load for one room. Like in my studio, like if you go to my consumer unit, I've got an RCBO for the sockets, and I've got an RCBO for the light switches, and I think there's one for someone else that I don't even know what that's for. So I've got to be very careful that the amount of power that's going, especially when I've got 3 rooms, live room, control room and Atmos room, I've got to make sure that that consumer unit can take the load of everything going on. Thankfully, my dad is a time-served electrician and he's very good at his job. So I was very fortunate that I was able to get him to sort a lot of the stuff in this room. For the ceiling speakers, I have got a socket at the top, and then we've got the wire coming behind the wall, and then that's going to a fuse connection switch that I can just switch on and off at the bottom. Now, I know like Sparkies could be expensive, but again, an added benefit of having an electrician is that, you know, especially like what my dad done, he put in sockets where I kind of wanted them. So he was able to put a few extra sockets in that I didn't have and put them in the right position. So I've got 2 sockets either side for the side and the rears. I'm very fortunate, but I understand that that could come at a cost. You know, again, you've got to pay a day rate for a Sparky these days. Could be quite a lot. If you know somebody, definitely get them in. Like if you can get an electrician in, it'll save you a lot of hassle. If not, you're going to have to think about extensions. Never, ever, ever do an extension into an extension, please. Don't do it. You don't want your studio to catch on fire. What you can do is if you buy a lot of kind of long power cables, what you can do is you can buy something like a Furman power conditioner. That can take 10 power cables. So you could easily have that, you know, at one end of the room, maybe close to the interface, have it in the middle of the room. And then again, it's just about getting the right length of power cables. And then my advice is to get pieces of trunking and just kind of have them, everything going along the skirtings. And that way everything is nice, tight. It looks nice. It looks like a good finish. And that means that you can have, if you're using the Furman, you can have 10 speakers being powered by this one power conditioner. So yeah, you've got to think a lot about the layout of your room, and you've got to think a lot about power, because if you can't power the speakers, then there's no point buying the speakers at all. Now, it's not just power cables that you've got to think about. You've also got to think about what we would call your data cables. Again, my dad's just an electrician, so that's what he calls them. But if we think about, again, your balanced cables, your TRSs or your XLRs, whatever you're using, depends on your interface as well. You've got to think about all of these cables are like scattered in different parts of the room, and you've got to get all these cables to one interface. So again, you've got to think a lot about, again, tidiness. If you can, like what we did, again, you can cut out bits of, just tiny little bits of plasterboard. And if you can get something like a little hook, then there's ways that you could kind of bring it down, have it behind the wall, and then bring it out, and then have it to come along the skirtings. What I advise is to have 2 separate bits of trunking, one for your power cables and one for your data cables. The reason that you want to have 2 separate bits of trunking is because you're not really meant to have data cables and power cables in the same piece of trunking. As far as I am aware, data cables are low voltage and power cables are high voltage. And again, if you have the 2 of them in the same trunking, then it can cause electrostatic interference, which you obviously don't want in a 7.1.4 Dolby Atmos setup when you've got all of these speakers needing to work correctly. And honestly, right, my advice is while you're at it, think about all cabling. Like if you can get all the cabling along the skirtings and you have it tidied away, honestly, it'll help, it'll ease your anxiety. And also lastly, like a final tip, make sure when you're setting all this up that you label your cables, because obviously you're going to have them all in trunking and then they're going to kind of come out and you're going to be like, I have no idea what all these fucking 12 cables are for. So if you label the end of it, then when it comes to it, you're going to be like, ah, right, okay, left, center, right, rear, sides, you know what I mean? Just an extra tip, just to make your life a little bit easier and give yourself less anxiety. Now, what you've then got to think about when you've done all of that is, how am I going to mount these ceiling speakers? Trust me, my ceiling speakers were an absolute nightmare, because the issue with studio monitors, right, and you're going to be using most likely studio monitors for your Dolby Atmos setup, the issue with those is that they don't have like a rear universal faceplate to use with like universal speaker mounts, like speaker wall mounts. And this means that in most cases you're going to have to buy a mounting plate, like a specifically made mounting plate for your speakers. Triad Orbit are the main ones that I know that do it. They do the whole Kali range, they do Focal, they do Genelec, and Adam have their own plates as well. Now that's just the plates. You've then got to have a mounting system that works with that plate, which, if it's Triad Orbit, again, this is how they make all their money, you then need to buy a Triad Orbit mounting system. And because of the way Dolby Atmos works, and unfortunately, as good as this Triad Orbit system is, it's fully rotational, for just like 4 ceiling speakers, you're going to be in the region of $1,000, 1,000 to 1,200. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not paying that. I'm not paying that. I'm not away to pay £1,200 to mount fucking 4 speakers. I'm just not doing it. And that meant that me and my dad, well, I say me, my dad, I'm fucking useless at DIY. I've got dyspraxia, man. I'm fucking hopeless. Again, this is another thing you need to think about. Is, can your ceiling take the ceiling speakers? I can't, because I've got these stupid fucking like ceiling tiles that many kind of office buildings have, and that can't take any weight. And it was going to be an absolute pain in the hoop trying to, like, I basically have to put a fucking new ceiling in. I spoke to Kali and I said, look, could this work if I was to have it on the wall, get the right horizontal and the right vertical? They're like, yes, that can work. So you can put it on the wall. You don't need to put it on the ceiling. You basically, what you need to do is you just need to ensure that you've got the right vertical angle and the right horizontal angle. I can't even speak today. The right vertical and the right horizontal angle, that basically means that it's pointing directly at the listing position. Now, the good thing is that the wall mounts are pretty cheap. I can't remember, but I want to say they were like, I don't know, 25 quid each or 35 quid each. I don't know, they were around there. I got them off Amazon. It was the faceplate that was hard, because we had to get pieces of plywood and then we had to figure out exactly where all the screw holes were. And our first Frankenstein, we ended up with it being able to work, but we didn't have the right vertical angle. I was able to get the horizontal, but I just wasn't getting enough of a vertical tilt. And that meant that we had to try something completely different. We ended up getting a TV stand and taking it apart, joining that to the setup with the custom plate and this wall mount that we'd bought. And yeah, we got that, and my dad fixed it all because he's anal with stuff like that, so he made sure it was like super sturdy and it wasn't going to fucking fall off. By the way, if you are thinking about, you know, putting them on the wall or the ceiling, please ensure that you use the right screws. Again, if it's plasterboard, again, you can get the specific plasterboard screws that you kind of pull, and then they kind of do that into the wall. I don't suggest that you just get a wall plug and just fucking screw it in. But yeah, like, I'm just telling you now, that, if you're not spending the money, is going to be an absolute bollock. It's possible, but if you've not got, like, if you're not good with your hands, you're not good with DIY, you're never going to do it. So if you know a joiner, you need to know an electrician, you need to know a joiner. But if you know somebody that's good with their hands and is quite crafty, then it can be done. I've done it. It was a Frankenstein and it was fucking took us ages. However, it was way more than like half the price. I want to say that it was probably about £300, around there, maybe about £300 all in, give the plywood and other stuff as well, just to have a mounting system to put your ceiling speakers up. So it's definitely something that you need to think about, and you need to know how difficult this is going to be before you even attempt it. Now, when you've sorted that out, this bit's actually relatively quite simple, because it's just, you just need to think about speaker stands. However, again, you just need to make sure that the speaker stands that you have can be adjusted to the correct height. Now, in regards to the correct height for all the floor speakers, you're looking at about 1.2 meters high. That's what they normally state. That's what I've got mine set at. I got really lucky with my speaker stands. I've got Frameworks SM50s from Gator, and massive shout out to Sound Service Distribution. And yeah, I managed to get these for free. It took ages, but I got them. That saved me a good like 250 quid or however it would have been. Put it this way, I bumped into them quite a lot, and they've never fell. I mean, there's been times that I've like shit a brick. You're like, oh shit, that's tippling, but it doesn't. And they really do hold the weight really well. They're really nice and sturdy, really easy to build. There'll be a link in the description for them, because at the end of the day, they gave me them for free. And know what? I'll help you guys out, man, right? If you're looking for speaker stands, try them out. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is subjective, but I have seen this in many rooms, and I've got it in my room. You need to think about whether you're going to have a projector screen. Now, many Atmos rooms I've been in have a projector screen. It is quite an expense, and it's a fucking bollock. So if you can get away with it, like, don't do it, I would say. But the benefit to having a Dolby Atmos setup and you've got a projector screen is obviously you can watch movies, you know, in Dolby Atmos, which is, again, if you can get your family and your kids in, it's just an extra nice touch. However, if you are thinking about a projector screen, there's a lot you got to think about. You got to think about how you're going to power it. You got to think about how long your HDMI cable is going to need to be, how you're going to be able to make that look tidy, and how you're going to be able to get that to your laptop. But what I didn't think about was the height needed for the projector. Projector stand I bought only went up so high, and I was like, ah, shit. So I remember I had them on boxes and stuff, and I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? So then my wife came up with the idea, why don't you like make a shelf? So I had to like think about my bass traps, because we're going to have the bass traps lower, but I was like, no, I'll have the bass traps to start at the start of the shelf. So I had to build a shelf, which was a shambles, some shit DIY. And again, make sure you've got the right height of your room. These rooms are 3.5 meter high. This entire studio is 3.5 meter high. So painting it, and trust me, see, putting up ceiling speakers 3.5 meter high, just you and your dad. My dad's like, have you got it, Paul? Fucking tell me you've got it.
I've got it, I swear, I've got it.
When really I was like,
look, this could probably fall at any moment.
But we're okay. We're okay. So again, you need to make sure that, again, your ceiling has got enough height to get above your speakers. Because again, there's no point having a projector screen if it's fucking the bottom half of it's going to be sitting behind speakers. You can maybe have them sitting in front of the speakers, but again, that's all things that you need to think about. But if you're not thinking about a projector screen, then it's no worry. Now, we're nearly there, I promise. I promise we're nearly there, right? But now, see, when you've thought about all that, you're like, fucking hell, that's a lot of hard work. You've then got to treat the room. For an Atmos room, you're looking to get the room as dead as possible. It's all about getting the reverberation time down. Just get the reverberation time down as much as physically possible, which in my room, it was a bollock, because I've got a big, massive window, like a huge window, and it's a big recess in it. And it's right at the edge of the room, which was a nightmare for me, because again, I was like, fuck, how's that's going to affect my bass trapping? So basically what I did was I spent a lot of money on rock wool, and I filled this entire window with rock wool and then put fabric over the top of it. And I've also got these glass panels at the very back. I've got them in every room. But I had like 3 glass panels, and I was going to put just like a curtain over the top of it, but again, the curtain was coming in pretty dear, so I just got 3 bits of chipboard from the work. I got somebody to cut it for us, and I just like screwed them in, painted over the top of it. And in regards to the rest of the room, it's all 2x1 panels that I made myself, again, all filled with rock wool. I went rock wool daft, and I'm really glad that I did that, because I've never been in a room that is as fucking dead as this. This is a dead sounding room. I can't wait to get the measurements up and get the waterfall graph, because I thought my live room was dead. This is like super, super dead. And for anybody asking, Paul, why would you want to take out all the reflections? It's immersive. Surely you want everything bouncing. Well, no, you don't in the setup that you're going to use if it's a studio setup, because in my setup, and probably in your setup, all the speakers are directional. So they're all pointed to the sweet spot. So you actually want the least amount of reflections possible. If you've got up-firing speakers, like you'll normally find in home studio setups where you don't want to have fucking ceiling speakers, you can have up-firing speakers where you want the reflections to bounce. But in this room, everything is pointed at you and it's directional. So you actually want the least amount of reflections possible. It's another thing that you've got to think very carefully about because it is very important. Again, it's going to affect the sound of the room. And again, you've got to think about, right, this is where the treatment needs to go. This is the treatment I need. How am I going to make this all work with the cabling and the powering and making it all tidy? And even like, I mean, I couldn't finish that bass trap until we'd fished everything down the back. And then once we'd got the power cable and the TRS cable down, I was then able to finish that bass trap. But again, I didn't know that until, you know, I was like halfway through it. Nearly all of this stuff I didn't know until I was in it. So again, it's something that's very important, and again, it needs properly planned. Now, the second to last thing that you need to think about, and this is very important, is your interface in relation to your listening position. Are you going to have a big desk, like a big studio desk? And again, how is that going to work in regards to making your cables all tidy? Because obviously, if you think about your listening position, you're going to be 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 meters from like your front three speakers, which is probably going to be where your interface is going to be. In most setups I've seen, when I went to Just for the Record and I went to Apogee, they all had these little desks. They all had these little desks they were using, and they just had a laptop. And again, that must have been so you had less reflections. And you think about when you've got like a standard stereo setup, you've got two speakers hitting your desk, and that's fucking enough. It really does have a massive impact on the sound. You've got 12 speakers kind of rattling off this desk. What I've done personally is I've got two desks. I've got one desk that's at the very back. That's going to house the interface, and it's not going to get in the way of the listening position. So I've got that back out the way, and it allows me to hide a lot of the cables, which I'm very anal about now. If I'm going daft with it, I'm still not happy with it. And on Amazon, I bought this 20 quid little desk on wheels. So what I do is I kind of leave that to the side of the room, and then I just wheel it out. It's so nimble and it's so light, and it's not got much to it. Just so I've got the least amount of reflections possible. But with it being on wheels and being quite portable, I can just move it out the way. So if I've got a client coming in, they could be in the sweet spot without any desk reflections getting in the way. Now, the last thing you need to consider is your sub position, because this doesn't really fall in line with the Dolby Atmos DART kind of like room layout, right? Because the thing is, when it comes to a sub, and you'll know this already, if you've got like a stereo setup with a sub, the placement of the sub depends on the room, and it depends on the room modes. So as much as, you know, Dolby will say, you know, it needs to be 1.2 meters and like right up against the wall, again, it might not work for the room. So when it comes to the sub, you've got to listen to the sub. Do it in a stereo setup. Just set up a stereo setup. That's what I did. And then get the right level of your sub. And then from there, start doing a few measurements. You know, if you've got SonarWorks, or you've got a reference mic, or you've got Room EQ Wizard, start doing a few tests to see, you know, where the best position for your sub is. I would suggest doing at least half a day on that. Make sure that you've got the sub in the right place before doing your immersive calibration. And of course, many people will be saying, Paul, what about the interface? What about calibrating like the speakers? How am I going to do that? You've not spoke about your interface. I'm under NDA, so I can't talk about it. I'm going to an event in London on Tuesday, because I know it's getting released on the 18th of January. And, you know, then I'll be able to talk about it. There'll be a full video talking about the interface, everything it could do, because it's like half the price of an Avid Matrix, and it could do more, and it's fully set up for Dolby Atmos. It's like the perfect interface to come along for me. Yeah, I'm going to talk about, you know, how it works, the routing, and all of this great stuff it can do, because there is a tie-in to, you know, room calibration, and I'd like, Paul, right, okay, I'll get in trouble if I say any more. But that is coming, and we're going to finish up the Dolby Atmos series with the interface and the room calibration. It's coming very soon. And there you have it. I am broken by the entire process. It's 95% there. I've still got 2 panels to finish. So I suppose I better go and do them, eh? My name is Paul Third, and I'll see you when I see you.